This is the War Room Roundtable podcast, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant businessmen and women on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on the road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their successes into your life and business. The War Room Roundtable is brought to you by your hosts, Jason Miller, CEO of Strategic Advisor Board, and Phillip Lanos, CEO of Own the Rhythm, and former podcast host for Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine. Welcome to the War Room. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Mark, how you doing?
I am happy and healthy and ready to share insights that are going to make people wealthy.
Hey, yes. We can see on your background, you've got the Nimble C-suite and the Nimble company.
Yeah, they're also in the foreground too. Two books better together. So,
and then in case you didn't know, there's another one. Someone behind you pulls out another book.
That's it. There you go.
Question that we love to open the show with is actually asking if you come from a family of entrepreneurs or like working professionals, creatives.
Oh, absolutely. You know, my grandparents were farmers, which are the ultimate entrepreneur because they put everything on the line every year. And they never know if it's going to be paid off or not. And so my grandparents said, let's not put so much on the line every year. And they built a series of cottages on a lake in Minnesota. And so they turned it into a summer business versus having to rely on the rain to guarantee their success. My father was a physician in private practice. He was an entrepreneur. And many others in my family have been entrepreneurs, which is really helpful, isn't it? Because if you come from a family that says it's okay to take chances, to strike out, and to not have to have a steady paycheck or benefits or health insurance to get you going, then there's a lot less holding you back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to really put it, man. And I'm glad that you took the time to break it down like that, because most people take for granted that life is supposed to just always be, success up and up, but only entrepreneurs know the truth, and only the people who risk it all and bear and take on all of that. And so it's really interesting to hear that was your perspective. Was it early on that you caught on to that sort of attitude in your upbringing?
Well, anybody who goes to college believes they're going to come out and get a job. And I have 2 college degrees, and so I was well inculcated with that belief that I'll get hired and everything will be happily ever after. And after 5 years in the corporate world, I was leaning with my head up against the cool wall as I was relieving myself, saying, why the hell am I here? These people and I have nothing in common. And so I joined an entrepreneurial organization as the director of sales, and 2 years later, that same feeling overtook me. Why the hell am I here? And so in 1990, I became officially unemployed, and I've been graciously self-unemployed ever since. And so I think part of that is, how do we make that transition from what we're trained to do to what we love to do? For those of us that have been through the school route. And what I did is took the pieces of the training that supported the pieces that I loved, and through some very loving mentorship was able to create a career that has now spanned 32 years. I've made millions of dollars, lost millions of dollars, but I'm sitting here happy and healthy and just enjoy to hang out with people that have brilliant ideas and share those ideas.
Yeah, man, I can hear it. I can hear it from the way you said that there is, probably won't fit into this podcast conversation, but there is a whole journey that took place to making that a reality. So maybe we can just cut into a slice here,
sure.
because it is back there. We're talking about the Nimble C-suite and the Nimble company. Where does the idea of Nimbility first come to you in terms of in regards to professional work life?
Yeah, well, the fundamental started off with some work I've been doing. I've been helping high-tech companies sell disruptive technology for 3 decades. Disruptive technology is that technology that once you use it, you never go back to doing it the old-fashioned way. and I've helped them sell billions and billions of dollars in household names in the technology world. And along the way, what I figured out is how to sell very expensive things very quickly to the executives of the organization. And it has to do with their temperament. Every executive has a different temperament, which is a different view of the world. And I wanted to bring this idea of understanding how executives think to each other, because they were always in conflict with each other. And it's because they didn't understand and appreciate the differences that they brought allowed the company to be highly functional. And since I'm not a psychologist, I didn't have the cred to bring the psychological market to model. So I joined forces with Dr. David Gruder, an extraordinary psychologist. He is the Mr. Integrity, helping people create organizations with integrity that are profitable. And as we came together, this was at really the beginning of the insanity of the past several years of COVID. We said we need to take this and extend this concept of temperament to how do people be resilient in these crazy times. How do we look at these people that are extremely successful and look at their extensions of their worldview that allow them to do this? And so that's how we identified this concept that we called nimbility. Fundamentally, nimbility is the intersection of resilience and innovation. And it's more than just being agile, and it's more than just being resilient. It's that those two things glued together that allow them to surf the chaos that faces the world. And to be nimble, partially you have to be okay with uncertainty. You have to be okay not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, but being okay with you'll figure it out enough today that tomorrow you'll figure it out tomorrow.
Right. Quintessentially the driving force of every entrepreneur. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. That's right.
Right on, man. Okay, I can see where that's going. So then how is this turned over for you? Now we're coming up on our 4th year post-COVID, right?
Well, I sure feels like it. It's not quite.
Feels like it is.
That's right. It sure as heck does feel like it is. The end result, of course, is those who have harvested the wisdom of that worldwide upheaval will be much better for it. And some of the impacts of this is that relationship is coming back to business. We missed each other so much during the times when we were forced to separate, and the only way we could see each other face to face was through something like this media. And what I'm seeing is a return to true relationships, and it's such a delight. And what that's driving is a transition from the experience economy, which has been the primary source of revenue for the past decade, to the transformational economy. In the experience economy, people are purchasing memorable events. And of course, that shows up in Las Vegas, and all of social media is about that experience economy, and where people buy things just because, hey, this is really cool. And what they're transitioning to is the transformation or the purpose economy, where what people are purchasing is meaningful. We're getting back to meaning. I had a conversation last night with a woman who helps people do tours of restaurants, and they tell the story behind the food. And it's about meaningful meals. It's not just about sating your hunger. It's about having meaning behind what it is that you're putting into your body and those that brought that to you. That's a really great example of a transformational experience.
Very interesting. Interesting. I didn't think about how much that trend is starting to take place, but as you say that, all kinds of things are connecting in my head. That's how you do business, man. You got to stay on top of where things are going.
Yes.
And I can see that this is something that I think may be a trait that's come along in the theme of your life constantly being able to observe what's going on and being at the edge of that, and how that's helped you transition time after time after time. Before I go any further, I want to make sure I check in with Jason to hear his reflections on all the things that you've been sharing so far, because I know he's got some serious thoughts about that.
I do. And I think it's interesting, some of the things you bring up, because some of those, when we talk about like experiences and things of that nature, right? And and how the market shifted so much in the last 2 years, hell, even the last 6 months, how everything has shifted so drastically, and how people are being so creative and doing things that, like, I just remember years ago, I went on a experience, right? And I got to fly a helicopter and do all these things. And that was really cool, right? And so somebody thought of that idea, obviously, that owned a helicopter, and it was just their private helicopter. They were making money doing it. Where a lot of people now, after COVID, right, came up with all these fantastic ways to do things and make money and be nimble, right? And be very creative and not have to work for the man, right? And it was kind of a forcing function that happened. And now it's changed our whole economy to the gig economy and all these different things that are happening, and businesses are being born out of Lyft drivers and all these different things now, and how the market's changed. But it shows how agile and nimble we are as people, right? Because if something happens, we tend to figure it out. Most people, not everybody, but most people tend to figure it out. The majority, probably. So I think it's interesting how you've connected all of that to the marketplace today. It's very cool.
Well, thank you. Well, I didn't really connect the dots and call it this marketplace. That they're actually it's broadly being recognized, and it's expected for the transformational economy, where people are buying this concept, and it actually has three prongs. It's make it better, make me better, make us better. And that's identified as going to be a $1 trillion business next year, where people are purchasing a better lifestyle, a more purposeful lifestyle, a more meaningful lifestyle. And we see that in so many different ways. Peloton essentially sold a transformational exercise bike. It changed the way that you saw a stationary bicycle by creating this involvement with other people and creating connection with other people, where you could, in COVID, ride together in the safety of your home. It's a transformational experience. And so what we're talking about in these books is, how do you capitalize on that? How do you reorganize your company so that you can deliver a transformational experience? Because if you're working with a group of people that desire transformation, they tend to be more empathic than those who don't. Just think about that for a minute.
Interesting.
In your experience, people that are looking to be better tend to be more empathic because they connect with people better. And if you do not deliver authentically, empaths will detect it and they will reject you forever. So we can't run the risk of using manipulative techniques that were commonly used in the past to market, to sell, to produce products, because our marketplace will detect at a level that you may not even understand and will reject you, and it's going to tank your company. Isn't that crazy?
This is a really fascinating conversation, because while I don't like to use generalizing terms like millennial, I was born in 1989, and giving away my age here. And there's been a stark difference between how I see the world, how I consume things, and even how I chose jobs and careers in my life over the years. And all of it had a lot to do with, can I get along with this person? More than anything else, it was quite literally, is this even a good person? Whereas other people, which also ties back to the work. Does this work make me a good person? Does it have meaning? Right? Because what everybody else sees is they don't believe in hard work. They don't want to do X, Y, Z. And, there may be some truth to it for a lot of people just want to get the easy ride, but also it's because that activation isn't there for them. Right. For people in my demo, if you will, it's
Yeah,
it's a lot of that.
I raised 5 of you, so it's all good. I take responsibility for completely screwing them up too. So I completely understand and have a deep empathy for that change. And I was born 30 years before you were, so that gives away my age. And the end result is that because of the environment we lived in, the political environment, the economic environment, we ended up with slightly different viewpoints. But I have attempted to keep my viewpoint as close to possible to what the general population is, understanding there's no one right way. And that allows me to connect dots that others may not see. And all right, enough of that self-aggrandizement. The truth of the matter is that people don't want to work hard because it's been modeled on television. My kids grew up watching Disney shows, and none of the kids that they saw on TV really worked. There was no hard work whatsoever. It was all easy work. And while I'm saying that's not the reason why they grew up that way, it certainly has an influence. Yet I also think it's entirely appropriate for people to say we don't have to work hard anymore. We have automation, we have artificial intelligence, we have robots, we have so many different tools that allow us to separate our livelihood from the mechanics of our body. But then what allows us to do is to work smart. And it allows us to work at a very high level of cognitive capacity. And I have adopted that in my life. I went from working hard to not working very much at all. But most of the work is done mentally before I sit down and crank out what people think is an astounding amount of content in a very short time. But no, the work was done before I sat down. And so I think there's that shifting, and millennials are really good at that. They're really good at thinking things through. And then they'll take action when they're inspired to take action, which in my opinion is the way to live.
Man, okay. So there's this conversation definitely took a deeper turn than I think I originally intended, but for the right audience too, because a lot of the people that we're looking to speak to is specifically in that place right now, whether they're on the fence about getting into business at all, whether they're in business right now and have no idea how to make it mean more than just the day-to-day grind, or whether it's a senior pro, C-suite executive just going, what's my next target? Because any entrepreneur that I've ever interviewed couldn't retire if they tried.
Yeah, they're paying themselves $70,000 an hour. If you take a look at that's in the assessment I've made, most entrepreneurs work extremely hard. They underpay themselves. They end up paying themselves about 70 grand a year. And the idea is hopefully they'll make enough money when they ultimately sell the company to pay back all of that hard sweat equity investment. But most of them never ever get there. And that's not necessary. You don't have to do it that way. There's so many new ways of partnering with other people. And you don't have to do it all. And you don't have to work 70 hours. In fact, I think that 70 hours is what destroys entrepreneurs, because they end up burning all their cognitive capacity, which is the most important asset that we have. Our capacity to figure stuff out, our ability to think and to handle complexity. And you don't get that working 70 hours. We only have maybe 3, maybe 4 hours a day of high quality cognitive capacity where we can handle complexity. And after that, it kind of boils down and people get burnt out and frustrated and foggy. And you have to recognize that that's just the way our brains are wired. And as people like myself age to the sage, there's even less cognitive capacity. And so I guard those hours very, very carefully and use them for the highest quality possible work.
Yeah, man. Now, Jason and I have talked about this on a number of occasions. How many real work hours do we really have? I mean, he himself, yeah. I know I've heard you say this on a number of occasions, Jason. It's like, if my team can get their work done in a certain amount of time and they want to go off and do whatever they want, like, great. Results are what matter, not the time.
Right on.
Yep,
Right on.
that's true.
Pay for our outcome, not ours.
Yep, that's it. The we most of us have seen or experienced at some time this archaic model of sit in your cubicle and shut up, and if you're not working, well, sit there and stare at your computer screen because you got to be there, right? And it is a very archaic model, and you know it's been on its way out for a while. COVID just like accelerated the shit out of it, right?
Right on.
That's really what happened. And I always tell people, I said, people say, God, COVID is a terrible thing. I think it was a good thing, really. I mean, not for the bad side of it, but I mean for the business side of things in the long term, it forced owners of businesses to think differently and think differently how we work, how we do things. And you can be so much productive if you just take all these handcuffs off and just function at capacity all the time. Because the capacity might only be from 9 o'clock to noon.
That's it. Most people have about 4 hours of capacity in them, and then people like Elon Musk do things to extend it to about 12 hours. But that's it. And so save the tasks that are low cognitive capacity, and typically they're physical tasks, for times when you have lower cognitive capacity, and do not burn cognitive capacity on decision making early in the day. Don't watch the news, don't read social media, because all of those burn cognitive capacity, because you have to think about that and you have to process it and you have to decide, what does that mean for me? And instead you start your day with, okay, what is it? What is the highest and best use for my creative and cognitive capacity in this moment? Now we're getting philosophical here, but welcome to my world.
I truly do believe that personal philosophy has an incredible impact on our output in the world and in just our everyday lives. So for me, I'm all about it. I think personal philosophy is really like an operating software, right? Like
right on.
Just like someone has Windows or Mac OS or Linux for those who are a little braver. I've never installed Linux in a way that ever fully worked, but that's kind of the way life is, right?
Remember, Mac OS runs on Linux, so it's okay. It's okay.
But one of the things that I really do love about this conversation is exactly how much we're asking people to reconsider something that they thought was pretty much set in stone, because that's the whole point of being nimble, right? Is about being able to be a leader and not live up to whatever is going on with just the status quo of what is. And I think this conversation is a welcome one. So with that said, bottom line, if you had a bottom line to what you're saying for the listener here, who is a business owner that is looking at the landscape of the world right now in business, their own industry, and going, okay, how am I going to step forward from here? Because coasting is fine, but stepping forward is the point.
Well, I'm not so sure coasting is fine, because companies that are coasting are crashing and burning faster than ever due to some of the things we've already talked about. And what happens is, though, in the midst of chaos, pivot isn't possible, because pivot requires an anchor. And in the midst of chaos, what it means is that you have to be able to step into the unknown, to the uncertain, and be able to make decisions in real time that you may have to reverse a few days down the road. And that's the nimbility that's required for us to handle the complexity of today's political and marketing and economic and consumer environments. And the sooner that you can gain those skills, we call them upheavals literacy. We had to name it something, and so we might as well invent something nobody ever used before. And upheavals literacy is the term we use. And in the Nimble company, we talk about upheavals literacy. There's a very deep chapter in that gets you very well started in that. So as an entrepreneur, as somebody living in this planet right now that wishes to be successful, You have to become upheavals literate, which includes being nimble and eliminating all of the sources of upheaval and chaos in your life that you possibly can, so that you can focus your cognitive capacity on those things you can't control.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to read the book.
But and even though the Nimble C-suite says, it sounds like you have to have it for a big company. Every one of the C-suite functions has to be done by an entrepreneur. And so we teach you what those functions are and the mindset that you have to use to fulfill that function most correctly, most accurately, most effectively. And then the Nimble company is all about execution risk. Okay, how do we get rid of all of those sources of upheavals and chaos? And I've never been able to find a really good book on execution risk, so we wrote it. And we wrote the two together because you need to have a more strategic book and you need to have a more tactical book. And the two together for an executive is critical. Then you can have all of the rest of your managers read the Nimble company. And so everybody's on the same page. And I think that you can also, there's the audio book if you want to get the audiobooks. But I suggest them for anybody who is thinking about starting a business because it's a blueprint, and anybody who's running a business because it's the map into the transformational economy and what you have to do to make that work.
I like this point very much, specifically because we were talking about operating softwares earlier. A lot of companies will draft their mission statement and what have you, their workplace culture, and that's fine. And yet, once it's drafted, nobody ever looks at it again, right? Ever. There's something about when I draft my own thing, that's it. And I've even taught courses with an agile trainer for Scrum and Agile, and we create a workplace agreement, right? And then we go on to teach the course, and then later people get into their breakout groups, and right away everybody forgets everything we just laid down as the workplace agreement or working agreement. And yet there's something interesting that happens if an entire group of people decide they're going to be in a book club, and they read one book, and all of a sudden people are like referring back to it and using that as the playbook. And it's weird what happens when someone or in a group has a shorthand, right? A language they can point back to and say, which is the whole point of a mission statement, what have you. But yet it always has to be some other third party's book that people actually attach themselves to, because people take for granted whatever work they just did to build their own working agreement. So I think it's a really interesting conversation to be having. Jason, do you have something to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, God, there's so much confusion, right? And that's a big part of it. I mean, I work with CEOs every single day, and a lot of them they're just so confused on, why are the things not working that used to work? It's like,
Welcome
because
to the world.
Things change. It's the world's changing, and you either get on board or you get out. That's it. There isn't really much more. It's not rocket science. you have to change with the environment. And there's so many companies that they're not figuring it out, and they're not figuring it out. And guess what they're doing? They're going out.
Crashing and burning.
They're crashing and burning because they can't figure it out. And sometimes it just comes down to the basics, right?
It always comes down to the basics. In the Nimble C-suite, there's nothing that's shocking about how we lay out what the executives do. Nothing at all. No, right. This is the way that you run companies forever. What changes, though, is that we define what is the temperament, what is the viewpoint, what is the skill set and mindset that is best fitted, best suited for that role. Mm-hmm. And so that you can fit the right temperament into the role, and then they operate out of their zone of genius instead of struggling. And that really was the intention behind the Nimble C-suite, is let's make sure everybody in the organization is as close as possible to their genius zone.
Which is like the last thing you need is a CEO who would do much better as a CMO.
And the last thing you need is a CFO who's a CEO who is going to drive the numbers into the ground because he's not willing to innovate. And we talk about that, how the temperament, the view of the world are important in a balance. We need to have a balance of change and stability, a balance of doing and being. And the person who has to orchestrate that balance is the CEO. And otherwise, you have to have, without those four elements, you don't have an organization that can tolerate the current environment.
Yeah, man. No, I'm loving this, man. With that said, I want to take a quick break to give a shout out to someone that made this episode possible today. We're talking about a company named Scale with Social Selling. They are actually part of our community, and there's a listener, and they've got a slot here with us. And essentially, if you've ever looked at your calendar and thought to yourself, "Oh, business would be great if I had the perfect prospect," but yet you have a calendar booked with a bunch of people that maybe you delegated to someone who hit you up on LinkedIn, and you're like, "Yeah, sure, I don't know, get me some leads." And we've all had that email in LinkedIn. Well, it's the opposite of that. Like they actually take the time to understand what's going on and put you in touch with the right people so that you can have a calendar that looks more like how you want it to look. So this is Scale with Social Selling with Terry. And all you have to do is head over to try.scalewithsocialsellingsystem.com to find out why this prospecting system is actually something that's going to work for you. We were talking about all this, right? Like, how do I move forward into things? It's very in line with the spirit of what we're talking about right now with this whole episode. And if you tell them the War Room podcast sent you, they will give you 20% off. So keep that in mind when you're reaching out to them. With that said, coming back to you, Mark, where should people go to get in touch with you, to grab your books, the whole arm and a leg?
All right, this is actually very simple. If you've heard something today and you say, "Gee, Mark, I'd really like to talk with you. I think your perspective could really help me out. I've talked to Jason. The guy's a bozo. He can't help me." I'm just kidding, of course. Absolutely. I do not ever want to.
We'll edit that out.
or not. We're just having a good time, right?
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
But if we can't have a good time, so call me. My invisible phone. I'll be delighted to talk to anybody. 719-440-0439. 719-440-0439. Text me. Tell me you saw me on the War Room. I'll be delighted to figure out a time when we can speak. Next is let's connect on LinkedIn, just like we did here. And Marks on LinkedIn.com, MARKS on LinkedIn.com will take you directly to my profile. Say you saw me on the War Room and would like to connect, and that's a good way to stay in contact. And I'm posting things on a regular basis that you might find interesting. And then you can learn more about the books at media.nimbilityworks.com, nimbilityworks.com, media.nimbilityworks.com. There's links to all of them. They're available from every bookseller, from Barnes & Noble, Amazon, whoever makes you happy. You can go and find these books there. They're available in physical book, print book, ebook, as well as audiobook. And I'm looking forward to getting the feedback and hearing how you're using the ideas in the Nimble company, the Nimble C-suite, to be successful. One comment that we've had is that most business books are an article fluffed up into 200 pages, and that's not our book. Our book has been called a blueprint because every page has multiple ideas, and there's checklists and questions and processes and models, and it's full of ideas and ways to help you organize your chaotic thoughts into something that can make you profitable and successful.
Right on. All right. With that said, there's really only one question left to ask you. It's tradition around here. That's how we close the show. And that is, if you could have invited anybody today, Mark, to this conversation, who would you have loved to have had here and why?
I think I would invite P.T. Barnum.
From Barnum and Bailey, huh?
Well, he was certainly part of that. And I would ask him, P.T., you were so good at tapping into the zeitgeist of the world and identifying what they wanted as an entertainer, that you changed how we looked at entertainment. And as we make the transition into this transformation purpose-driven economy, what do you see through the lens of a master dot connector that we are missing, that will allow us to grab the attention of people who need what we have so that we can serve them perfectly where they are.
Right on. It's a good answer. I like that. Yeah. I'd like no, it's the first time somebody's brought up PT in that way. I think it was only one other business book I've ever even heard his name mentioned, and so it's a pretty interesting choice to make. With that said, it's tradition around here for Jason to close this out, so I'm gonna let him close this out. But I thank you for the conversation.
A delight. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, hey, geez, great conversation. It went pretty deep, which is great. And thanks for allowing us to take it deep, because the deeper you can take these discussions and the more you get to learn from them. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for opening up that brain of yours and dumping that good Kool-Aid all over. And we just appreciate you being here.
And I'm honored to be on your show. Thank you, Jason.
Right on.
All
Cheers.
right. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the War Room Roundtable with your hosts, Jason Miller and Phillip Lanos. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and always remember, if you can dream it and believe it, then you can go achieve it. We'll see you in the next episode.